The other day, I was scrolling through TikTok and I came across this video right here. Obviously, what it shows is a T Rex skeleton on the bottom and a sort of really fun reconstruction of a sort of wyvern T Rex on the top. Obviously, the original poster posted it with the intention of making it seem like we might be reconstructing dinosaurs incorrectly, and in reality, they were dragons. There's a few things wrong with this post. The main being, they didn't even credit the original artist, that being Emily Stepp. In fact, they cut her name out of the actual image, so that's a bad start. But as I was looking at this image, there's one thing that came to mind that I couldn't quite shake the feeling of. The comments section is probably a mess. And so I decided to do what I probably shouldn't have done. I looked at the comments and I was correct. The comment section is wild. So I just had to make a video about it because some of these comments that I found were just, just they kind of talk about certain things that I've been getting a lot of recently. Like in my comment section, people commenting certain things that are kind of similar to what we're seeing right here. So I wanted to talk about it because some of these things I just want to squash because I'm getting real tired of it. There's not a lot. I just picked like a few of the main examples. But yeah, let's just talk about the very fun topic that is dinosaurs and dragons, or more specifically, T-Rex and wings. Here's the first comment. This makes the arms of the T-Rex make so much sense. Ugh. Okay, so we're off strong right here. And also look at how many people are liking it. So far, about 4,500, or actually closer to 4,600 likes. A lot of people agree with this person. They think that the arms of Tyrannosaurus Rex does not make sense. And obviously, a lot of people think that because the arms are proportionally small, which is true. Like, those are very small arms for such a large dinosaur, such a large animal. Those are very small. If humans had arms that were like proportionally the same as Tyrannosaurus Rex's arms, we would have arms that were about 5 inches long. So yeah, I agree. They are short. But people who typically think that it's weird and doesn't make sense don't really look too much into it. I've found. The reason why it's thought the T Rex and some other large theropod dinosaurs had arms like that is because it seems like they were prioritizing their bite over their arms. T Rex had one of the most powerful bite forces of any animal to ever exist, which is just absolutely insane. It's insane that it had a bite force like that. But when you have a bite force like that, why would you really need to spend energy on your arms? It kind of feels like it's a little bit unnecessary by that point. And the same could potentially be said for other large theropods, like even Carcharodontosaurids, who had bites that were fairly specialized, very good at tearing through flesh. So it just seems likely that they didn't really need their arms. And so over time, their lineages were just slowly starting to lose them to the point where they were almost becoming vestigial. And vestigial structures do exist. That is just something that happens sometimes in nature. Sometimes you'll have a structure that's kind of like a leftover in a way. So it's really not too crazy to think that T Rex just had small arms. Again, it probably just didn't need too large of arms. But what I don't understand is why giving them wings would make more sense. Because again, I don't think that you're really thinking about it too much by that point. T Rex was around 8 to 10 tons in weight. That is not a small animal, okay? Um, some of them might have been larger than that. Some individuals might have surpassed that size. That is a huge animal. In order to be able to properly lift itself up to fly, it would need unrealistically large wings to support an animal like that. I mean, the some of the largest flying animals that we know of are like the Quetzalcoatlus. Quetzalcoatlus, it was as tall as a giraffe. It was a huge animal, but it only weighed about as much as a grizzly bear, that being around 500 or so pounds. For an animal that is that tall, you would expect it to be, to weigh more, but it doesn't. It only weighs around 500 pounds. And that's because it is adapted to be a flyer. It was lightly built with hollow bones. T Rex was not built like that. So it would need huge wings. It's just unpractical. There's no reason for it to have wings like that. And so if we can rule out the huge wings part, then it would just have tiny wings. If we were to assume the T Rex had wings, they would just be tiny, which means that they would just be as useful as its arms, as in not very useful. So how does that make more sense? A lot of these comments, they do come from people who probably just mostly saw memes on the internet and they formed their opinion around that. Without actually doing any research on the topic or looking a little bit deeper into it. And that's how we spread misconceptions, ladies and gentlemen, by not doing our research and just saying things without really much thought behind it, I guess. And again, the fact that that many people agree with them, that's concerning. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Oh, this one. Hold on one second, guys. Just get ready. This one is a doozy. In Ancient Aliens, they said that an archaeologist changed the name from dragons to dinosaurs in 1845. My dude, you're using Ancient Aliens as your source? You decided to use Ancient Aliens as your main talking point to help support the idea that T-Rex had large wings, or to help support the idea that T-Rex was actually a dragon. I Ancient Aliens. Oh, how did we get here? How did we get here? How did we get to the point where you can look into a comment section about dinosaurs and you can see somebody using Ancient Aliens as their source? How did we reach that point? That actually might showcase how damaging a show like Ancient Aliens was, or some other History Channel shows. Because of the fact that History Channel was intended to be an educational channel. It was intended to be a place for you to learn something. Uh, because they're the ones that are showing you something that's kind of structured like a documentary. A lot of people might look at that and say, "Huh, yeah, I could see it." When I can't even begin to tell you how much of a problem that is. Ancient Aliens is not a good source for practically anything. There is so many issues with that show. The whole idea that so many of these ancient civilizations that weren't European, mind you, were unable to build these extravagant structures and they needed the help from extraterrestrials. It's just insulting in a lot of ways. There's so many issues with that show. And I know that they did an episode that was dedicated to showing you how aliens wiped out the dinosaurs, which is a problem in and of itself. Um, no, do not use Ancient Aliens as your source. And secondly, archaeologists, paleontologists are the ones who deal with dinosaurs, okay? Paleontologists discuss life in the past, like your Paleozoic, your Mesozoic, and a good chunk of your Cenozoic. And this whole idea that they changed the name of dragons to dinosaurs, I don't even know where that would come from. We've never officially called dinosaurs dragons. And maybe they're referring to the idea that some ancient cultures found dinosaur fossils and possibly interpreted them as dragon bones. And that might be somewhat possible, but I think that the jury's still out on that. I don't think we really have a lot of substantial evidence that supports the idea that they were basing these mythical creatures off of dinosaur fossils. Like China, for example, I know that China, their dragons are mainly based off of a lot of their local fauna, as well as like some of the in some aspects a lot of the weather that is experienced over there. That's not to say that fossils never had an influence on cultures. Quite clearly it did. Oftentimes fossils have been ground into medicine, for example, but in like a scientific manner, they were recognized as dinosaurs. Like that was just the official scientific term that was assigned to them. Because it was in the 1800s, it was noted that these animals we were discovering are completely different from animals that we have today. Your Hylaeosaurus, Iguanodon, and Megalosaurus, it was noted that they were different on a skeletal level. So it was only natural to categorize them into their own taxonomical group, that being Dinosauria. It wasn't created to erase a pre-established name because again, there really was no pre-established name that existed. Like there's really no conspiracy that's going on with that. Scientists are not like trying to hide anything. I can tell that many people who say stuff like that don't actually know any paleontologists because it's just wild that those are some of the conclusions that we reach. Anyway, I better move on to the one. I'm still caught up on the Ancient Aliens part. Just this one might be a joke, but this person says, and we believed that dinosaurs had these small arms. How foolish we were. LOL. So yeah, I wanted to bring this one up because for some reason people always think like they always use the word dinosaurs, like this plural, to like assign it to the group as a whole. When not all dinosaurs were like the T-Rex, okay? Like T-Rex, yes, had proportionally small arms. Abelisaurids actually had shorter arms, but whatever. People don't know that part, I guess. A lot of dinosaurs did have proportionally long arms. I mean, look at megaraptors or Spinosaurids, for example. Some Allosauroids certainly did. Even if you look at some ornithischians, their forearms are certainly quite a bit longer, proportionally speaking. So, yeah, no, not all dinosaurs had proportionally short arms. I don't know how we reached that conclusion either. This one. They say the T Rex was closer in time to humans than to Stegosaurus. Human legend talks about dragons. This one seems to be hinting at the idea that humans lived alongside non-avian dinosaurs, which is not true. I don't think they quite understand what we mean when we say that T Rex lived closer in time to humans than to Stegosaurus, because that is a true fact. But the way that they're stating it is like hinting at the idea that humans lived alongside T Rex. By closer, we mean 66 million years. That's how close T Rex lived to us. 66 million, million with an M, years. Whereas the time in between T Rex and Stegosaurus was around 80 million years. So yeah, it is closer, but not by much. It's not like it just lived last week or even the last century. No, it's still been dead for a long time. It's just a closer span of time in the grand scheme of things, but it's still a very long time. This is one I had to talk about. I just had to talk about this one. Ostriches and emus have similar arms. I'm sure you all heard that one. Now, I know that there's a lot of science communicators who have covered this exact topic before, and a lot of them probably went into way more detail than what I'm going to cover right here. But it's just, this is such an annoying misconception because it's simply just a misconception that wastes time. As far as I can tell, this misconception stemmed from a TikToker a few years ago who I don't know who it was, and I'm not gonna try to find out either because I don't want to start any problems. But a TikToker who decided that they were going to look at a T-Rex skeletal and compare it to an ostrich skeletal, and they noticed that there was some striking similarities between an ostrich arm and a T-Rex arm, and they reached the conclusion that T-Rex likely had wings, ostrich-like wings, as opposed to the arms that they're often reconstructed with. And stating that in a TikTok video did a lot of harm because a lot of people saw that video, and then they watched the video and they decided to start parroting everything that they heard in that video and started spreading it across the internet. So much so that we're still getting comments to this very day. And it's just ridiculous because there are so many problems with their analysis between the two arms. Because, yeah, if you're just eyeballing them from those small images, then yeah, they vaguely look similar. But they messed up the way that the arm is. Like I know that they got the shoulder mixed up with the humerus on the ostrich. They kind of they mixed up a few bones. They didn't know exactly what they were looking at. And so they looked at it a little bit wrong. And they didn't look at the fine details of an ostrich hand and the T-Rex hand. Because if you look at the fine details, you'll realize how flawed that statement truly is. For one, T-Rex actually lacks a certain bone in its arm that would allow it to fold a wing. So if it had a wing, it would be unable to fold it. And so that's kind of strike one against T-Rex wings. For another, if you actually looked close enough at the hand of an ostrich, you'll notice that the bones are fused together to help support the wing. Guess what is not happening on the T-Rex arm? Those hands are not fused. The bones in those hands are not fused together. They are individual fingers, like a regular hand and not a modified hand that helps support a wing. Not to mention, T-Rex also lacks a keel, which is something that ostriches do have, and it's like a structure that helps aid birds in flight. And a lot of, the reason why ostriches still have it is because their ancestors did. The fact that T-Rex doesn't have it shows that, of course, it doesn't fly today, and of course, it didn't fly back then. Its ancestors didn't fly back then either. So there's just so many problems with that assessment. And now you have people that say ostriches and emus have similar arms. What? Maybe if you're just glancing at them, sure, you can say that they do. But when you get into the actual details, then no, they don't. And it's quite insulting that people just keep repeating it without actually looking deeper into it. They just heard somebody on the internet, and instead of confirming it, they just decide to spread it everywhere. And it just, like I mentioned at the beginning of this little rant, it wastes time because I can guarantee that practically all of my science communicator friends and other science communicators out there get that comment a lot in their videos. I know I sure do. That's why I included it here because it shows up very frequently. It doesn't matter how many videos we put out there, there's still going to be people out there who believe that T-Rex actually had arms that were basically identical, like, no brainer compared to ostrich arms. And, oftentimes we would like to stop and try to correct those because we don't want them to get out of control. And so it just wastes time. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating. So yeah, let's stop saying this, please. It's just really flawed thinking. And then lastly, but certainly not least, of course, in the comments, people are leaving behind generated images. They got so giddy about the idea of typing in make a T-Rex with wings in Chat GPT or whatever, and then it just pooped out this. They didn't even put the arms in the correct spot. The arms would be down here on Tyrannosaurus, and yet they put them on top of its body, like on the shoulder, because they want to make it look like a dragon. Uh, it's just, ugh, ugh. And like another thing I want to bring up real quick that is another really big annoyance is the idea that people bring up that, oh, T-Rex had huge wings. It's just they didn't fossilize because they were made out of a softer material. And man, they might be on to something with that one. Too bad there's no examples in the fossil record of animals with wings that got fossilized. Oh, no. Yeah, no, plenty of pterosaurs have been found with their wings, okay? And, even if we don't find evidence of the membrane part of the wing, we still find evidence of the bones that helped support the wing. Because believe it or not, they need bones to help support their wing. Pterosaurs have a modified ring finger that is extremely long that allows them to support the membrane. T-Rex does not. And let me tell you, we have found so many T-Rex specimens. So many people have dedicated their whole careers to studying Tyrannosaurus rex. We have found a lot and never any evidence of that. And no, scientists are not being malicious and destroying the fossils because they don't want the truth to get out. I could tell you right now, with all of the paleontologists I know, if any of them found a T-Rex that had a large wing, they would be so giddy and so excited to publish that because that would be huge news. Okay? I don't think you know any paleontologists if you think that they're all covering up a conspiracy. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I've gotten so many of those comments a lot recently. I don't know why. I don't know why there's been a sudden uptick in it, but it's been happening quite a bit. And I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. Hopefully, squash some of those misconceptions. Or maybe there'll be people arguing in the comments. I don't know. Who knows anymore? Yeah, this was a pretty frustrating video to make overall. Again, I don't really like to get into these topics too much, because other people have already, but I don't know. I figured I had to sooner or later. I'm sure I've made a short at some point kind of addressing it, but this is like my first long form video talking about that topic. Quite frustrating stuff, really. Quite frustrating. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have for this one. Don't use Ancient Aliens as your source, and have an awesome day.